And the first question is to Pete. Buckingham Palace has a safe full of bullying accusations made against Meghan Markle, according to a former member of staff. Is it true or is it false?
My first question is, how big's the safe? Because it must be quite a hefty
It's a
document.
department.
Yeah. It takes up an entire floor.
You mean it's a vault?
Yes, I'm going to vault or safe. It's a fine line, isn't it?
We all wondered what they were doing with the refurbished Royal Mews.
Yeah, I'm going to say, yeah. It's one of these shows, we've got all like laser beams and everything. It's some kind of Tom Cruise movie. But no, this generally wouldn't surprise me, because if I remember rightly, the lawyer was brought in at about 2017 to deal with some allegations that were made about Meghan Markle and how she treated the staff and everything. And if I think about 17 members of staff around Prince Harry, they suddenly rather conveniently either resigned or retired.
Yes.
And it was a lot of shiftiness went on, and it just kind of got swept away. But this generally wouldn't surprise me if it was true. As we know, Meghan Markle is very me, and
me gain.
Yeah, that's the phrase. Me gain. That's what we're looking for. So yeah, it wouldn't surprise me if this was true.
But is there a very compelling reason why it's not true? Because if you were part of the royal household, you would have leaked it all by now, wouldn't you?
Yeah.
I don't know. I think one thing you have to remember is there's a lot of people who work at Buckingham Palace who take that kind of what we see, we don't go to the press, and I think there's a lot that still have that dignity and respect.
I've got to be honest with you. I often worry about royal correspondents. No disrespect to any of them not watching, but when I spent a lot of time hanging around in Windsor, I knew a lot of Windsor Castle staff. And first of all, no one ever got fired for leaking to the press. And secondly, all of the things that appeared in the press where they go, a source close to the royal family, none of them had heard any of this. And the stuff they were talking about behind their backs didn't get into the papers at all. Allegations of bullying in the workplace, I mean, it's something that is a major problem, but if you work for these public figures, it adds an extra level of complexity, doesn't it, to trying to deal with it?
Yes, and I think we as a society have become quite susceptible to something called shame-based control. So a lot of the times an allegation may not be true, but the public will assume it is true and think the very worst. And so what you get then is very defensive behaviour on the part of those accused of things. Also, what is the definition of bully?
Yes.
So we've had instances, and I won't name any in specific at the moment, but they don't strike me as bullying. Or where is the line?
Because Dominic Raab.
Well, I mean that was.
That felt like bullying.
There are other instances. I mean, I was in court yesterday, and a High Court judge had to raise his voice to somebody in order to get them to frankly stop talking and get out of the room. Now, that's not bullying. That's enforcing the authority of the court.
Is there an element, though, between the British and American culture where, Americans can be a lot more direct. And I can really imagine how Meghan Markle sort of goes into Buckingham Palace. I mean, I don't like the woman, but I can imagine, they're all like, well, of course, it's been done like this for the past 80 years. And they're going, just get on with it. Oh, my God.
But surely the difference is, bullying, the definition must be, whatever the legal definition is, I don't know, but it must be repetitive and consistent, not what I would call robust management, insofar as if I haven't performed and you tell me off, that's not bullying, that's management. There's a big difference. So if it is consistent harassment and it's it's done on a kind of an intimidating basis, then that could be seen as bullying.
I'd also take it that it would be more on a personal kind of thing. It's not, like you said, there's a difference between it being in terms of you doing your job and attacks on you as a person as well. What I imagine, like you say with Meghan Markle, I imagine with most Americans I've ever worked with, they are very direct and they do get to the point incredibly quickly. And it's just a cultural thing. And I can, like you said, I can imagine a lot of the staff at Buckingham Palace may have been like, oh dear God, what on earth has just happened here?
Yeah. But the problem is with a very noisy sort of woke left minority, the fact that they are clearly weaponising that word, bullying, is a real problem for society.
Mind you, I will say one thing. I'm a member of Masonic Lodge, right? We had a very nice gentleman who was American who became the master of the lodge, right? Now, if you think about it, the secretary is like the prime minister who's got the real power. And he came in as the boss and started actually doing things. And people are like, oh, my God. Because if you are American, you would assume, well, I'm a Duchess now. I'm going to start telling people what to do. Or what, the mayor doesn't do anything? That's a complete... Well, how's he the mayor? Well, it's a bit strange, really.
Well, there is exactly... and it's very easy to get taken advantage of, not just Americans, I mean, even me. I mean, I fell for it recently when I was just out in Windsor Great Park. So I thought I'd walk to Old Windsor on the assumption that it would be, the old bit of Windsor. Yeah. And of course it's not. Of course it isn't, because this is England. So, of course, the new bit is called old, and the old bit's probably called new, And
that is... can I tell you something? there was a borough of New Windsor, and it is the old bit. Yeah, it's slightly odd. Slightly odd.
I just want to pick up something Russell just said there, and it's the weaponisation of these terms and phrases that we're seeing, not just here in the UK, but obviously in America as well. And it's the way that they are being used to, like you said, to take people down and to take people out of the conversation.
It's all part of cancel culture.
And it is. It's one of the main bits that's being used through cancel culture because, like you said, people naturally presume these things are true because of how they're phrased and how they're reported on. And I do think we have to be very careful about how we're going to judge people's behaviour.
Yes, I know. It's amazing, isn't it? That's Meghan Markle. She said, I've been watching That Was the Woke That Was for the past couple of years, and you've never, ever defended me in any way. So let me send this message to you, Meghan. God bless your love. It won't last. Anyway, is it true or is it false that there is now a whole department of Buckingham Palace filled with allegations of bullying against Meghan?
I was going to say this one might be true.
It's absolutely true. OK, to Russell. Donald Trump's campaign has raised over $200 million in just 3 days following his guilty verdict. Is it true or is it false? I have to say to you, I think this is one of the most shocking things I've ever seen in my life. A district attorney elected to put Donald Trump in prison by whatever mechanism he can find.
Yeah.
It's just, in this country, it is the district attorney who'd be going to jail.
So imagine being the Democrat strategist that first allegedly thought it would be a really, really good idea to go after Trump through the courts and are now seeing that particular strategy implode in front of them on the basis that it is arguable that their actions have just made this monster, as they would call him, much, much more popular, to the point that, yes, as I understood it actually, and this is why I think this is true, within about 5 hours of the verdict being handed out very recently, I think his campaign donations topped about $80 million, but also the donation website crashed because of the popularity of people trying to donate.
It's amazing.
This is, I'm sure, true.
Stephen, I appreciate that you are a British barrister, not an American lawyer. However, let me get this right in my mind. You've got the equivalent of the Crown Prosecution Service is the district attorney. This district attorney and others have run on a ticket of, if you elect me, I will find a reason to imprison Donald Trump, which in the UK would mean that they would not be anywhere near a decision to prosecute. You have a judge whose daughter is a fundraiser for the campaign against Donald Trump. Once again, if it was Britain, the judge would be thrown out. And then you've got a situation throughout the court case where witnesses weren't allowed in if they were in favour of Trump. The jury got directed here, there and everywhere by this judge. I have to say this to you. First of all, does this sound improper to you? And perhaps you can illuminate us a little bit. But moreover, I worry because this is supposed to be the country that leads the free world. And this is the sort of thing that you would expect from somewhere, say, like Venezuela or a dictatorship.
Yes, well, I think that is very important. And what I'd like to stress, because there are elements here in this country who think that copying the United States is clever and doing what the Democratic Party in the United States does will be clever. And rather than talk about Mr. Trump, because I don't want anybody alleging that I have a position on Mr. Trump, I certainly don't, I'm completely neutral as ever, I want to talk about another empire that did this, because there was a man called Cato in the Roman Republic, and Cato thought it was incredibly clever to use the courts to do politics.
Yes.
Cato suspended the rule of law, and Cato conducted unlawful trials, as our parliament did. And I mean, don't get me wrong, when I called it a kangaroo court, it wasn't because I was amused. Now, our parliament conducted a totally improper trial. If it had got anywhere near one of our courts, it would have been thrown out. But
that's Cato. He's saying that he's come back to life and is living in Joe Biden. Well done, Cato.
Well, he's missing his two hands because he got executed and had his hands nailed to a wall.
I've got to be honest with you. It worries me very greatly. I'll tell you one thing: is he using hands-free now? That's how he phoned up. Anyway, but I'll tell you one thing that I thought was telling about Donald Trump was the fact that he said he committed to not prosecuting Joe Biden when Joe Biden leaves office. Now, I think that is an extraordinary place to be in the United States of America, where you have to have a campaign pledge to not illegally prosecute your opponents.
Yes, it's outrageous. I mean, it might mean that if he keeps that pledge, things will improve in the United States. But just to finish the story for everybody, what Cato did collapsed the Roman Republic. It caused the first dictator, Caesar. And it's causative. Once you mess around, once people no longer trust justice, once you take it away in the rule of law, in will come a strongman dictator. That is the message of being human.
There's a wonderful irony to this story, though. Guess who's on trial this week?
Go on.
Hunter Biden.
Oh, Hunter Biden.
So it is alleged, obviously he's not gone through the court process yet, so he is innocent till proven guilty, but it is alleged that he improperly purchased a gun, a revolver, a Colt revolver, and at the time was a drug addict, which of course he has admitted to in his book. The sentence apparently for such a thing could be as much as 25 years. The person that's bought this is a Republican nominee, someone that Donald Trump, as prosecutor, he put in place. So there's a delicious irony, I think, to this, that what happens now if Hunter Biden's trial becomes equally politicised and Hunter Biden is dealt with in the same kind of inappropriate,
that
way?
won't happen.
Funny?
That won't happen because, you know, if you look at Hunter Biden and his laptop, if you talked about that on social media, even though it was true, social media platforms would take down your post.
But this seems a slam dunk. So he bought a gun. Yes, he did. I mean, look, you're the lawyer, right? So let me put it to you, sir.
I would take
let me put it to you.
Okay.
I always like it.
So what you're saying is it's similar with Prince Harry and the visa, right? There was a gun. He did buy it.
He was a drug addict at the time.
I mean, I've got to
go to prison.
Hunter Biden's career, Pete, is really impressive because he gets thrown out of the Navy for smoking crack. And then his next job is to earn, what was it, $50,000 a month as an advisor to an oil company. He doesn't have a degree in geology, experience in geography. He doesn't have any knowledge of chemistry, apart from the crack. And that's not going to be that much use.
He's run a few meth labs.
Yeah, that's right. He knows how to burn things up.
Yeah.
But so fundamentally, this is a bloke who's built an entire career, we assume, on the fact that his dad's famous, because I can't see how he would be paid $600,000 a year to work as an advisor to an oil firm for his previous track record in the military.
Yeah, 100%. He's the definition of a Nepo baby, you know.
Yes.
If he didn't have the surname Biden, he wouldn't be where he is now. That's just a statistic.
What, in court?
Probably, yeah.
But he might be in prison next to Donald Trump in a few weeks.
Because I want to bring this back.
Can you imagine if in the ultimate trolling mechanism we put Hunter Biden and Donald Trump in the same cell?
Yeah, cells next to each other.
Can I just bring this back to Donald Trump? I want to use the line from Star Wars. You know when Alec Guinness goes, "If you strike me down, I'll become more powerful than you could possibly imagine." I presume no Democrat has ever seen Star Wars, because this is exactly what they've done. Which is surprising, because this is exactly what they've done. They've taken somebody who they could have just relatively not ignored in that way, but could have gone after it in a different way. Because they've used the courts and the way they've gone about this, they've become the villains of their own story. And I put it back down to Trump derangement syndrome, that these people lost their minds over the existence of Donald Trump, over the fact that people support him, over the fact that people like him, on all the rest of it. They cannot comprehend why it exists. And the thing that they also don't get, and I say the same thing about the left in this country, if you go after people like Tommy Robinson, if you go after Donald Trump and these people, it doesn't mean that the people who liked them were suddenly going to not like them anymore. You know, if anything, they become martyrs. That's the point. Yeah. And it infuriates me no end, because it is dumb. There is no other word for it. What the Democrats here is dumb.
But you're talking about that. I mean, Stephen, once again, I appreciate that you talk about legal affairs. You don't take political positions publicly. Or indeed privately.
When's this man ever had an opinion?
Here is the thing that we did see in this country, which I think is a worrying development, similar to the Donald Trump thing. We saw Tommy Robinson and Anjam Chowdhury. Now, I have to say, I am an anti-immigration commentator. I can't say that Tommy Robinson, who attempted to enter the United States of America on somebody else's passport, is a good egg, because it would make me incredibly hypocritical to do it. But you couldn't get away from the fact that the so-called far-right leader was raided by the police every week after week, month after month, year after year. Anjam Chowdhury, who is an actual terrorist convicted of terror offences, could not be raided every single week to investigate him for terrorism because of his human rights. And I don't understand why we feel that we're not in a position where there's a two-tier legal system here.
Because we have the war on truth, and because impartiality is breaking down. And the police fear, it's quite obvious they fear one side more than the other.
Yeah, agreed.
And they also take this odd view. So if I criticise Anjem Choudhury now, they'll suggest that I'm a Tommy Robinson supporter.
Yes, that's right.
If I criticise Tommy Robinson right now, they won't assume I'm an Anjem Choudhury supporter.
Yes.
Meaning that the only option I would have if I was going to go down their path would be to criticise Tommy Robinson.
Yes.
And they do that too. But that's not due impartiality. That's not free and fair. I have the right, and all citizens have the right, by the way, to be scared of the far left and the far right. Yeah. You're not supporting one just because you're scared of the other.
I just want to ask all, before we go on to the next question, I just want to ask all of you, because there is such thing as a duty voter in Britain and America who will worry that somebody is, inappropriate for public office. Does that harm Donald Trump, do you think, Pete?
I'm not sure, actually. This election in the United States is probably going to be one of the most weird elections, the presidential ones, that we're going to see in quite some time. I don't know how the different kind of coalitions of voters are going to look together, but the one group of people I would look at is white, suburban, female voters. These people kept Hillary Clinton out of office and they shifted to Donald Trump. Now, will this court case, how they'll vote is... a lot of us, when we look at the numbers, we don't know.
So you don't know. Do you think it helps or hinders?
Well, no, my bigger problem is voter apathy and the fact that we repeatedly see in the United States here, particularly in things like local elections, police and crime commissioner elections, turnouts of 15 to 20%. Yeah. Sorry, just quickly to the Trump point, the easy way for the Democrats to fight Trump is to put up a candidate that is not Joe Biden, the corpse. Perhaps if they put up a decent candidate, they wouldn't have to take it through the judicial system in an improper way.
Yeah, Stephen?
Yes, I mean these are all very good points, but it's interesting that demographic Pete mentions, because they were the sort of median voter for Hitler in Germany, and Hitler they tried to take Hitler down with the courts, and it didn't work either. Human societies can make problems for rods for their own backs if they're not careful.
I have to say to you, one thing we must not do is compare Donald Trump to Hitler. Please. But anyway, you compared Joe Biden to Cato. So, I mean, it's all good. But anyway, so Russell, is it true that Donald Trump raised $200 million because he got found guilty?
Yes, and by the time this goes out, probably $250 million, I suspect.
Absolutely true.
That Was the Woke That Was continues after the break. Welcome back to That Was the Woke That Was.
Hello and welcome back. This is That Was the Woke That Was, and we're joined by the barrister and Spectator writer Steven Barrett, the talk presenter and presenting everything, Russell Quirk, and the political strategist, Pete Barnes. OK, so the next question is to Steven. The Maldives has banned all Israeli tourists from visiting the islands. Is it true or is it false?
Well, we are going to have to start asking very serious questions about this switcheroo between people who don't like Jews but just say they don't like Israel. Yeah. And, sometimes there's the concept in this country of taking the mick a bit.
Yeah.
And a lot of the people who piously recite that they dislike Israel, not entirely sure you're not taking the mick, to be honest. I think you've pushed it too far. Your mask has slipped far too many
times. We saw the openly Jewish thing, and by the way, that drove me bananas. The way they had a go at the police officer. The police officer was attempting to protect somebody, but he wasn't saying you look Israeli or you look like a Christian Zionist or whatever. He was saying you look like a Jew, and these lot are going to rip you to pieces. And I have to say, the idea that we should tolerate this sort of behaviour, I find extraordinary.
It is extraordinary, and it's not due impartiality. It's not our constitution. British Jews in this country have every right to not be associated with Israel if they choose not to.
Correct.
They have every right to join the Labour Party and support it if they want to, or even the Greens.
Yeah.
But, if we're going to start pushing...
that might be a step.
If we're pushing Jews out of British life, then our country is wrong and broken and racist. And I don't want to live in a wrong and broken and racist country. We must... And that... Being anti-racist means anti-racism, against racism for anybody.
Yes.
Andre, it's not very often that these two things are compared, but the Maldives and Magaluf.
Yeah.
Magaluf, you might have read recently, had lots of protests against British tourists in particular because they didn't like the fact that apparently we were a little bit loud, although we do prop up their entire local economy. The consequence now, apparently, according to Simon Calder, who I had the pleasure of talking to recently, he said...
Was it on one of the shows you were presenting?
One of the many shows.
It was on one of the shows on Talk that I've been presenting. Which one I can't possibly remember, obviously.
Well, there's so many.
Pick one.
Anyway, yes, so apparently
Russell doesn't put in the invoice, he submits a book.
The consequence, of course, is that tourism in Magaluf has been absolutely devastated as a consequence. What will happen now, if this is true, of course, is that you have to be careful what you wish for as far as the Maldives are concerned, because it won't just be Israelis that can't and don't therefore go to the Maldives. It will be people like me that think that's disgusting and will therefore boycott.
I've got to be honest with you. I was in a hospital in Israel with members of the IDF who'd been injured, and many of them would not show their face on camera. And I was like, well, why is that? And they said, because we fear being banned from every country in the world. Yeah. Because they'll literally say anybody in the IDF is not allowed to say. I mean, I met a very nice bloke from Silicon Valley in America who literally didn't give a toss. But a lot of the younger ones were very, very worried.
Because the one thing that we don't talk about is the fact that the countries like the Maldives are basically an Islamic nation. You know, let's be real about this. You know, for example, in the Maldives, it is illegal to be LGBT. You know, let's look at Indonesia that have done the same thing to the Israelis and to the LGBT community. We look at the Maldives as this lovely nation with all these bungalows on the sea, but yet it has a streak of radical Islam that runs right through it.
I've got to be honest with you. I see friends of mine who are in same-sex relationships going to some of these countries, and I think to myself, I'm not sure this is a very wise move.
I completely agree with you.
I'll tell you something. You know, I mean, I was laughing the other day about Dubai, which obviously, well, homosexuality is illegal, but instead, and I'm not joking, they hold cabin crew nights for cabin crew and their admirers. Now that's all well and good until somebody who's a local doesn't like you, and then you've got real problems.
Huge hypocrisy there, though, in terms of how alcohol is served freely in that, whether it's Dubai, Saudi Arabia, or the Maldives. I mean, I'd suggest they make their minds up. They're either for things or they're not for things.
Well, one good thing the Maldives has done is this, and you've got it right, Russell. They've told us we are wrong-uns, avoid coming to our country. Yeah. Now, actually, in a sense, that's quite a good thing. I think every country should have a wrong-un score. Yeah. Right?
1 to 10.
Yeah, like you know how our American audience won't know this, but British restaurants get a score out of 5 for how hygienic the kitchen is. What you should do is, whenever you land in a country, they should have a wrong-un score.
So it could be on Booking.com.
But I hate to say
scrolling down.
Five is like Texas, which is relatively free, whereas 1 is Saudi Arabia.
Can I point out that this does exist? It's called the Corruption Index.
Yeah, okay.
But then the Maldives
but it should be at the airport.
It should be at the airport.
We are a grade 1 wrong-un.
Yeah. Every year you just watch the number go down.
Yeah.
But
we'll talk about then if there is a similarity between Magaluf and the Maldives. It's that Magaluf...
And there aren't many.
well, Magaluf is under very strong Marxist control because Spain has gone very far left.
Yes.
And so is there a meeting of values and ideals between certain groups of people in our society? Are they all causing the issues?
I think there is something to that, but this is all part of a larger movement. It's that BDS movement. It's the boycott.
BDS?
Yeah, no, BDS. Do not put words in my mouth.
It's a driving school.
Yeah, I thought that as well.
No.
Spanking.
No, do not put words in my mouth. This is how things become a GIF. I can't afford for that to happen again.
I'm not putting anything in your mouth, Pete. There's no danger.
Since 2005, major companies and nations around the world have started to pull out of Israeli-owned businesses, Israeli-owned investment funds, and all the rest of it. And it's to do with this kind of, it's not that we don't like Jews, it's that we don't like Israel. And I think you're right. The mask has slipped too many times.
But Pete,
and it has to be called out when we see it.
Pete, when you look at that list of products to boycott, there's not a lot of Israeli stuff on there. It is principally stuff that either has an Israeli division or has lots of Jews involved in it.
Yeah, that's true. But if you look at the main one, for example, Turkey put a huge tariff on selling concrete to Israel. It was a main importer, and because of it, that means that Israel have now had to go to Europe to where concrete apparently is more expensive. And this was done deliberately because it's a Jewish nation, not because it's Israeli, but because it is the only Jewish state. Yeah. We have to start calling this for what it is, and I think it is anti-Semitism.
They put a tariff on it, so basically they're saying that it's okay to go, but we just want to earn more money from our anti-Semitism.
Yeah. I think it was about a 40%
Wow.
tariff, if I remember rightly.
Unbelievable.
But we're seeing it again and again and again. I think there's a big company that imports things that are made by like Heinz and all these other companies. I think they're called Diplomat. They're finding it difficult to get things into Israel now because of this BDS.
Okay, we're not talking about Heinz. Nor are we talking about the fact that your dad worked for Heinz. And apparently Pete used to get, as a gift when he went to university, there was a Heinz shop where they sold the dented cans on the cheap to members of staff.
They did.
And so he'd go, there you go, son, there's your dented cans for university.
Yeah.
Oh, Pete Barnes Sr. Well, thanks, Dad.
Yeah.
So, okay, I'll tell you what, I'm going to reword the question. If there was such a scale, would the Maldives get 5-star on the wrong scale? Is it true or is it false?
It's true.
It's absolutely true. Okay, so to Pete, radio presenter Ian Dale has withdrawn from the race to become an MP just 2 days after announcing he was quitting his job to run for Parliament. There is a bonus question as to whether Russell Quirk's going to get the job. Because he's got every other one.
Yeah, I hear his agents in talks.
He's like,
No. Can I just say, I won't mention them, but it's on a channel that I would not want to present on.
You're like Sandra Bullock. You're in everything.
Mrs. Rabbit out of Peppa Pig, for those that watch it, have got kids.
So for those people who don't know Ian Dale, I mean, what do we say about him? He married somebody wealthy.
Yeah.
He opened up a shop that went bust. He's been a media commentator for years, and he's always fighting back the tears, isn't he?
Oh, my God.
I talked to you tonight, fighting back the tears.
Yeah.
Oh, God, we should nickname him Gaza.
I'm going to say the dehydration of that man because of his tear problem is
right.
staggering. But no, I honestly, this was one of the. I think this will be the funniest story of what's going on here in the UK for the general election. I think. I'm not a big Ian Dale fan. I find him quite irritating, I will admit. But one thing that, when I'm not sat here, I am a strategist. And we always tell people in the media, if they want to run to be an MP or anything like that, give it a year. Give it a year. Let some people actually dig through what you've said and we'll see whether it's a good idea for you to run.
Yeah. Ian
Dale just thinking on a whim, I'll decide to stand as an MP, was one of the dumbest things you can
I've got to be honest with you. Ian Dale once sacked me. From
He's gone up in my estimation.
An internet television station called 18 Doughty Street. And the reason he sacked me, this is absolutely true. So Ian quite likes stage makeup. Yeah. Let's just be clear. So I nicknamed him Mahogany Face, which I thought was quite a good line. And his part, I said to somebody, "What's happened to Mahogany Face?" And it was Ian Dale's partner.
Oh no!
I was like, "That's Ian Dale's partner." Well, I've just called him Mahogany Face and said that he's invented his own new ethnic minority, which is didn't go down terribly well.
No, but
I think Ian Dale honestly has given up makeup and now just creosotes his face. I mean, that's just extraordinary.
No, but I do think this is a stroke of a little bit of arrogance, I think, on Ian Dale's part, that he thought he could just wander into this, pick up the nomination and off he goes.
I actually think it's stupidity as well, because what happened was some of his opponents went through an old podcast where he said that he didn't want to live in Tunbridge Wells and didn't really like the place. Well, you know what? Maybe he should have just pushed through and gone, well, there are things I don't like about the place, which is why I'm trying to change it and make it better.
Oh, yeah, definitely. There is ways he could have got around it, but the fact he just said, nope, not doing this, I thought did strike me as a little bit baby throwing the toys out of the pram, I have to admit. I thought it was a little childish.
I personally think that if you live in Tunbridge Wells, you've dodged a bullet.
Yeah. Well, I was going to say, actually.
It has restored, or it's part of a very essential constitutional principle, that our politicians are tied to the land.
Yes.
They represent that place. And it doesn't matter whether they're local politicians, national politicians, they're tied to the land. The oddity of PR and non-fixed systems, I find it bizarre, because of course I know our constitution so well. But in Germany, for example, you can have legislators who are nominally for a place that they've never been to or don't go to, or just not even for anywhere, just sort of list people. And what loyalty do they have? Who holds them accountable? Who holds them responsible?
Well, of course, we're not going to talk about the general election because there's broadcasting rules, but of course, there is the other house in Britain, the House of Lords, which has precisely that problem, where that old idea of somebody representing a particular area, living in a particular area, that is long gone. I mean, I think I'm right in saying that Trinity Place in Windsor has more members of the House of Lords living in it than Lancashire.
But there is a difference. So the House of Lords, of course, is the secondary legislative chamber. I guess the counter-argument to what Stephen's saying is when you're legislating on a piece of legislation, yes, you should be thinking about country, society and so on. However, the 100,000 constituents of each constituency look upon their Member of Parliament as someone to back them on local issues. So, a load of pylons are going to appear in your particular area or whatever. I personally do think that if you are wedded to the area, you might be more loyal to the people in it.
I think that's absolutely right.
On constituency issues.
Anyway, we're going to move on. Oh, come on, what can we say about Ian Dale? Right, so does anybody want him back? No.
So is he unemployed now?
I'm going to say that's a good question. I don't know.
It won't make any difference. The partner's loaded. Who's been bankrolling them all these years anyway? Okay, so has Ian Dale, has Ian failed?
Yes, he has. It's true.
It's absolutely true.
That was The Woke That Was continues after the break. Welcome back to That Was The Woke That Was.
On to Russell. According to a recent survey, over 90% of self-proclaimed socialists prefer Adolf Hitler over Donald Trump. Is it true or is it false? This reminds me, by the way, of when Google said both Hitler and Churchill were racist.
And do you know what? I don't know. I genuinely don't know the answer to this. What's worrying is it could be true. It could be true. Such is the hate on the left for Donald Trump. I'm not sure. I'm really not.
I always go back to those videos. You see them quite a lot, don't you? Particularly in America, where they go around and they give people like a quote, and they say, like, who said this, Donald Trump or Adolf Hitler? And they always say that it's Donald Trump, but it turns out to be Adolf Hitler or something like that.
But it also works the other way, doesn't it? They can also put in front of people, say, who said this? And it might be something, and that they're Democrats, that Joe Biden has said. They say, oh, that's outrageous, that's terrible. Well, actually, it's the president that you voted for that said it.
So come on, I'm gonna push you on this. Is it true or is it false?
I think it's false.
It is, in fact, thank goodness, false. OK, on to Stephen. A yoga teaching eco-warrior who delayed 48,000 cars on the M25 is asking hard-working British people to pay her court fine. By the way, I love the way the writer inserted hard-working. Presumably, this person has made a financial appeal, but whoever it was presumably waiting on the M25 that particular day.
Yes. Well, I mean, we do get a lot of this, and a lot of attempts to avoid being convicted when people are doing something criminally wrong in the name of their political beliefs.
Yeah.
And attempts to crowdfund when they get in trouble. And it really does sort of undermine the rule of law. And the other thing to say about it is that the courts have a very strong tradition, best expressed by one of our old law lords called Lord Hoffman, who's a brilliant judge, who said that it is part of the noble art of political protesting, basically, that you take the punishment. Yeah. That's how you demonstrate your commitment to the cause. Yeah. If you're trying to wheedle out of punishments, if you're trying to come up with, legal arguments to get out of it, if you're trying to crowdsource...
But Stephen, as a barrister, as somebody presumably, because you've dedicated your life to the law, must love the law, must love what the law gives us in terms of freedom and equality, I suppose. This idea that I have an ability to participate in the political process, but instead what I'm going to do is commit crime and then tell a sob story about it. I mean, the reality is, first of all, one of the things about these climate change people, which I find incredibly frustrating, is that they say, we need to talk about climate change more. We don't talk about anything else, apart from Israel, right? But that's the issue. That is the number one thing. Secondly, they feel like they have a right to do this, even though it's illegal, because their cause is so important. But what they really mean is, actually, people aren't going to vote for the nutter stuff that we're coming up with. So what we want to do is force them into it.
Yes, and a lot of this is authoritarians who simply are rejecting the democratic process. And it is a phenomenon now that people are rejecting democracy. Belief in democracy seems to be quite low. If you want to avoid the Cato situation, I'd recommend you all increase faith in democracy, increase engagement.
But also there's been this debate about the proposal to heavily restrict protesting. Now, look, when I was younger, what people used to do was turn up in Parliament Square with their placards for a day, shout a bit and go home. But then you got this Brian Hoare thing where he just moved in for like 6 years or something. And the other thing that we've seen is people protesting outside butchers, but standing with a megaphone for like 6 weeks, just shouting abuse at people. That's harassment.
But we don't need tougher laws, do we, Stephen?
No.
The laws already exist in terms of obstructing a highway, causing criminal damage. What really gets me at harassment, what really gets me is these, and I know you've got to be careful here, but these very liberal judges where the evidence is clear that someone has smashed a bank window or daubed something like the Bank of England or whatever with orange paint. They go to court and they are let off or found not guilty, acquitted, whatever the term you want to use, on the basis, no, it wasn't criminal damage because it was legitimate.
Well, I have to say...
You should have legitimate protest, but not if damage
I have to say, one of the only cases I've ever seen of genuine racism in this country was after the riots, I think in 2010 or 2011, I think it was something like that, in Clapham Junction and other places. I went to court to watch somebody who had smashed up and burnt down an off licence or a newsagent's. And the little bloke who owned the place was devastated. We saw all these black kids who'd stolen a case of Volvic all get custodial sentences. This bloke turned up crying with letters from this left-wing activist. Oh, he writes for The Guardian. He's an anti-capitalist protester. And he got a slap on the wrist.
Yeah.
And I thought, it's why
it's
we are...
here.
Well, that would be unfortunate, and we must avoid that. No justice system is 100% perfect, but we must work to avoid that. That is a bad phenomenon. But one of the things, because I do love the law, and one of the things I love about our law is how closely we try and mirror what ordinary decent people think. So you actually just stumbled across the position that the Lady Chief Justice just made clear in law. She just said, yes, by all means have protest,
why I present all
but
the time.
no damage. No, you can't have criminal damage. It's not a legitimate.
I'm going to move on now, but I always say the difference between, if you like, Republicans in Northern Ireland and the ANC is this. In Northern Ireland, you are able to vote. If you are black in South Africa at the time, you were not able to vote. There's a big difference between people saying violence is my only way that I can get my message onto the table, and people who say, I'm just going to do violence because I'm unpopular. Has a yoga teacher, eco-warrior who delayed 48,000 cars, asked hard-working Brits to pay her court fine? Is it true or is it false?
I fear she has.
It is absolutely true. OK, to Pete. In a move that will make the Church of England more relevant to younger... True. Right?
Yeah, Church of England, true.
In a move that will make the Church of England more relevant to younger generations, leaders have announced a plan to rebrand the church as the Church of Climate Change. True or false?
True.
I mean, that Justin Welby, he loves it, doesn't he?
That already happened ages ago.
Yeah, I was going to say, I thought it was the Church of LGBT. I thought there was lots of different ones now.
But has it officially changed its name?
I don't know. Probably not. So I've got to guess this is false. But it's interesting, isn't it, that a lot of these kind of dying institutions in the UK, and not really in the UK, but across the world really, have latched on to this kind of woke ideology. They've latched onto it. And in terms of kind of to reinvigorate its membership, to kind of spread its appeal a little bit further, to get involved in issues that it wouldn't normally get involved in. And I just wonder, how long will that last? Because I do look at woke in a kind of religious context.
Oh, without a doubt.
That you have, like, we often say that, we've got all these figures
like I always say, Greta Thunberg, lo and behold, a child is born to take away the sins of the world.
Yes,
But I don't mean to be disparaging.
It is.
It's cult-like.
Yeah, it is cult-like, and it is fascinating.
It's a child who was born to take away the sins of the world. But thankfully, in this case, it's Jesus. OK, so Pete, is it true or false that the church is changing its name to the Church of Climate Change?
It's false.
It's absolutely false.
That was The Woke That Was continues after the break. Welcome back to That Was The Woke That Was.
OK, to Russell. Derby University. Derby University is wasting £82,000 of taxpayers' money to fund a research project into Dracula.
So is this Derby what we would usually call a polytechnic, or what we used to call a polytechnic, which is not really a university?
Their main degree is a degree in underpants pulling up.
Yeah. You could do a degree,
shoelace tying is a doctorate.
You could do a degree in woodwork or Taylor Swift, that kind of thing. So sorry, run this by me again. How ridiculous is this?
£82,000 on Dracula. True or false?
Oh, why do I get all the difficult ones where it actually could be
come on, it's the University of Derby. Of course it's true.
Yes,
OK, well, in that case, Pete's helped you out. It's absolutely true. OK, on to Stephen.
Yeah, it is.
On to Stephen. A quarter of adults don't know when the First World War or the Battle of Hastings was. Is it true or is it false? Now, just to be clear, 1066 and 1914. When? Didn't even have to consult my notes.
No, well, I mean, we do get these surveys from time to time. It's always disappointing when people don't know things. I mean, the reason I exist in public life is to teach people law, hopefully in an entertaining way, so that will empower them. I mean, if that is true, then I think it's a sad fact.
I'll tell you one thing that is very sad. Well, you know what I'm going to say. 1/3 of 15-year-olds think that Nelson's column is a reference to Nelson Mandela.
Oh. And they also think that Churchill is the nodding dog.
The
in
nodding
the back
dog.
Of people's cars.
Yes.
I mean, we are allowing our own culture to be eroded.
But here's my question, Stephen, on a serious note. You studied history at Oxford. That's a high...
Law.
You studied law, but you were interested in history at Oxford. So this is a high bar. So you're debating with people who are the creme de la creme, one would assume, or one would hope, in the country.
Except today.
Yeah.
What are you pointing at me for?
But at the end of the day, people can only know if they get taught it.
Yes.
I mean, ultimately, I watch some of these quizzes, like, you know, who wants to be a millionaire or whatever, and some of the earlier questions, which are about soaps, I find quite difficult. And that's only because I'm not particularly into that type of television programme. I'm not being a snob. If nobody gets taught about the First World War, if nobody gets taught about the Battle of Hastings, they're not going to magic the...
Yeah, but they are, though. It's
They
on the
are.
curriculum. I've got 3 teenage daughters. You know, there's only 2 years between the 3 of them. Work that out. One of them is doing GCSEs now. I happen to know that her curriculum does include those things. They are being taught it. It's just not going in.
But
or they're not at school. Or they're not listening.
I think this actually goes to a broader problem that we have in the UK, is that we don't put an emphasis on education. It is teachers are mainly seen as babysitters. Our school, we do not push our kids. We do not take anybody who seems to be smart or take an interest in something is seen as a nerd or a swot.
Well,
or
Peter,
something.
in my day, I'm old enough to be able to say this. If you didn't listen in a history lesson, for instance, the teacher would, and I love him to bits for it, would throw a bald rubber at you.
Yes.
Now, I'm not suggesting that we do that, but the difference between the discipline in schools 20 years ago and the difference in discipline in schools now, where teachers can't make you do anything. There is no discipline. There is no outrage. You know, you can't even give a child a detention. Otherwise, I guess you'll be called a bully as a teacher.
Well, look at the abuse Catherine Berbel-Singh received.
Yeah, it's exactly the
Which is
point.
absolutely outrageous.
That's the difference.
I mean, I feel
discipline.
I feel very sad, but I think in schools it's part of this rights culture, not responsibility culture. Yeah. Everybody knows what rights they've got, but nobody knows what responsibility they've got. And actually, I have to say, I mean, I was a toe rag at school, but I have to say to you,
we're shocked.
Absolutely shocked.
I have to say to you,
how many schools were you expelled from?
Ask to leave.
Invited to leave.
Actually, thank God I wasn't. But actually, I think at any educational institution I went to, you know, the idea that one person was just going to ruin it for everybody was not going to be tolerated.
Yeah.
My understanding is now that's not the way it is.
But also, one thing I would say is that parents don't take as, and I don't just make sweeping statements, but parents seem to not take as an active interest in their kids' education. And I think a lot of that may have changed over COVID because people were aware of what was being taught. But, I mean, for example, my parents were heavily involved. They wanted to know had we done me and my sister done our homework. They were heavily involved in our education.
I've got...
But I hear stories where parents just don't seem to care. And I think, one prime example is I have a lot of friends who are teachers, and when it comes to Parents' Day, the amount of abuse they're getting from why little Jimmy is failing, it's the teacher's fault. It's not necessarily the parents' fault. And I think there has to be a back and forth.
I've got to be honest with you. I've got a lot of time for what you did, Russell. I mean, I don't know your family particularly well. In fact, you're the only member of your family I've met. But
and I've kept it that way.
Yes, absolutely, absolutely.
It's Mrs. Q.
It's Russell's family. But you decided to send all your daughters to different schools based on which school you thought were most appropriate for them.
Yes.
I mean, that's a highly engaged parent.
Yeah.
Isn't
Well,
it?
and most people think it's very odd. So I have twins, not identical twins, but twins that are 14. They are at different schools. Most people, when I tell them that, they raise an eyebrow.
Yeah,
but it's because one of my daughters is very sporty, happened to get a sports scholarship, sports scholarship at a private school, and the other is more academic, so she's ended up at a grammar school. That made perfect sense to me. Rather than seeing them them as one entity, or indeed looking at it from the point of view of me not wanting to pay a private school fee, which I now do, I saw them as individuals, and they therefore need to be educated in a different way. Yeah. Quite remarkable, though, actually, when you have got 3 kids at two different types of education systems.
So they're all elite schools, but they're all very different types of elite schools.
Yeah. So 2 in grammar, 1 in private school.
And so obviously, just to explain, you are from one of the parts of the country, and there aren't many, where there is still a grammar school
6
system.
grammar schools.
Yes.
Wow. In Essex. Yeah, 6 grammar
schools. So obviously, just to explain to people who are not British, a grammar school means that if you pass the exam, the government pays for an elite school for you to go to, but it's within the state sector. Yeah. And your other daughter is from a straight-up private school, which presumably also had entry requirements, but you pay to go to.
The entry requirement is, can you write a cheque?
But which one's better and why?
Well, again, the answer is it depends. It very, very much depends on the child. So if I swapped my 2 twins, they would be far worse off in every respect, I think, socially, from a sports perspective, academically, being in each other's schools. But the schools, the hat tip to Newhall and CCHS and Chelmsford, are fantastic for those kids, for those daughters.
And on this theme, don't always assume that intellectual education is a good thing, because the Constitution sort of doesn't. The Constitution prefers to trust common sense, because you can control a bunch of people by using complexity. The last thing people like doing, and I deliberately do it for fun, is ask the stupid question. Most people don't want to ask the question that might make them look stupid.
Yes.
And that is a power that a bad person who just uses gobbledygook can use to control you and get you to do whatever they want.
But let me ask you a little bit about your background, because it is fascinating. You're not just a meatloaf impersonator.
Obviously, that's how I make most of the fun.
So let me get this right. You're from quite a poor background, both academically and financially. And then you get to Oxford to do law, which is an incredibly difficult thing to do. And now you're obviously practicing barrister. And you've got a daughter as well. And how easy is it to make a decision about her future, given that you are such the antithesis of the rest of your family?
Well, I thought, before I became a parent, I thought I had all sorts of plans. And ever since I became a parent, they've gone out the window. And ever since I became a parent, I really do just want my child to be happy. And that is the most important thing.
Yes.
And I'm, in many ways, she is actually quite academic, so that's good. She's bookish, like me. She's not...
I'm not being disparaging to your daughter, but there's going to be very few people who are as academic as you. So by comparison, all of us look a little bit stupid.
Well, I got adopted by a Cambridge professor who was head of a faculty. So my child was running around 2 or 3 in a Cambridge college, the president lodging of a Cambridge college. So she's immersed
you went
in academia.
To Oxford.
Well, exactly.
What happened there?
Well, he got promoted to a professorship, but. The other thing to just get out is that she's an artist and I'm not. Yes. I have no experience of art at all. In fact, I'm really
apart
bad.
from the meatloaf impersonation. Yeah.
Well, I like words, so I'll do art with words, and I like poetry, and I like singing, and word-based art. But I can't do the visual arts at all. I never have. You take me to a gallery, and I'm just like, why are we here? When's the martini coming? But my child is making me learn art because she loves it so much that I'm sort of having to. And shades of colour, she's obsessed with them. So I think, you just look at your child and see who they are.
I think Peter makes a great point, which is now parents, as we've ended up in this situation, despite having the governments that we have, shall we say, whereby we are now subject to what I would say is a big state. Yeah. Whereby parents now think, and maybe accentuated by COVID, parents now think it is nothing to do with them. Yeah. It's now up to the state to educate their child.
Absolutely right.
It's not. When it comes to education, discipline, morals, and so on, it's down to the parents.
OK, so the final question then is, are a quarter of British adults unaware that the First World War and the Battle of Hastings took place in a certain year? Is it true or is it false?
I'm going to say I want it to be false.
And unfortunately, you're wrong. It's absolutely true, which is amazing, really, because it now comes to the end of the show, and I have to tell you who the winner is. Despite being the only person who got something wrong, Stephen is going to be very pleased because Pete Barnes got 800 points. Russell Quirk did get 1 million points, but had 1.5 million deducted for being on everything. Stephen Barrett, despite getting something wrong, he was on 885 points. So congratulations to Steven Barrett. Thank you so much to Russell Quirk, and thank you so much to Pete Barnes. Until next time, goodbye.